Alright gentlemen, today I think I'm going to go for the exhaust manifold gasket replacement. I'm going to try to patch up some of these exhaust leaks so I don't die. Something I found really interesting about the old Renix 2.5s is they have a coolant line going into the intake manifold. And I wondered what the hell is that about. It comes out back here and just goes into the heater core and then it returns to the water pump as normal. Why couldn't they have just run it to the heater core from right here like they do on the 4-liter? It's because it's throttle body injected. So this acts as a heat sink to keep the intake manifold warm so that the fuel from the injector in here doesn't condense on the walls of the manifold. When the manifold is warm, it encourages the fuel to stay atomized so it can, when it travels throughout the manifold, it stays in that mist form instead of just like sticking to the walls. That might be part of the reason it runs absolutely terrible when it's cold. But that is a really interesting way to do things. That's why fuel injected engines, where the manifold only carries air to the engine, they don't need this because there's just air in here. But this manifold, they call it a wet manifold because this carries both air and fuel. So it needs to be kept warm. I'm kind of going into this blind because there's really no information on the Renix 2.5s. So I'm going to label everything as I take it apart. This is the fuel injector. And you can see the throttle plate down there. And I don't know what this is, this little contact here. There's a tiny little button and 2 wires that run off it. And that button would only ever be contacted at wide open throttle. So I wonder what that is. What does that do? It just kind of goes into the harness back here. Here's your connector for the weird idle motor thing. And this goes to the intake air temperature sensor right there. Just gonna kind of move that out of the way. This is your coolant temperature sensor. These are all vacuum lines. That's a lot of vacuum lines. They all go right into the throttle right there. And this one is from the CCV. The rest of them go down behind the engine, probably for the CAD bullshit. I'm kind of just attacking this at all angles. This is the wide open throttle sensor, I'm calling it. There's like, what? Oh no, there is a TPS, it's back here. I wonder why this is necessary then. This is the throttle cable, just pops off the ball stud and then you squeeze these 2 little tabs to get it out through here. This is just the throttle return spring. Just helps the throttle stay closed. I've just kind of pulled the whole harness up out of this cavity down here. We've got a connector for the O2 sensor, which is right on the top of the manifold. And this is another like intake air sensor looking thing. Where are we at here? So right here, there's another sensor that threads into the intake manifold. And it looks like we got the same thing right here. So I don't know what those are. Maybe they're like fuel sensors of some kind. I don't know. But I'm trying to look for the connector for the fuel injector and there doesn't appear to be one. It's just like hot wired on the harness. And I'm gonna have to disconnect these fuel lines, I guess. That's gonna be cool. I don't know where the pressure relief valve is, but it has been sitting overnight, so there's probably no pressure left in those lines. Next up, I've decided to remove these 3 10mm nuts. I have no idea what that's gonna do. Okay, that was just the cover. Okay, that wasn't very helpful. There appears to be a gasket here. I'm going to be very careful not to break that. And where the wires connect to the injector. Oh, can I just take that out? There's a little tab here. Oh. Okay, I see. And this just slides out of here. Okay. I thought this was the connector. It's just a rubber piece to seal air. That's the weirdest connector I've ever seen. Look at that. Okay, well that's one mystery solved. Man, look at how ancient that is. Alright, now I'm just going to fish the wires out of the way. So the fuel lines appear to be a 1/2 inch and a 5/8. And I have not relieved any fuel pressure at all, so hopefully I don't blow myself up here. Those have probably not been touched in years. Probably haven't ever been taken off. Yeah, I got it. Another thing with these is I have no idea which is the high pressure side and which is the return side. And that one's out. Alright, now I just gotta get this off of here. This upper bolt was just starting to twist this whole bracket, so instead I started loosening that lower bolt. So I got the fuel lines off. There was no fuel pressure left. Like I said, the truck's been sitting overnight, so thankfully didn't have to worry about that. There is a loose hose clamp just chilling on this coolant line. That's interesting. This is the throttle position sensor. I unplugged that earlier. The whole harness is, you know, over here out of the way. I think my next step is to get the huge ass throttle body carburetor electronic fuel whatever thing out of here. I see 2 nuts right here. There's the other one. So I imagine there's 2 more on the back side. And with the whole throttle out of here, that's going to clear up a lot of room. Okay, so I got these 2 nuts off. This one was a bitch. Hardly enough room to get a wrench in here. And then there's just 2 on the back side I reached with the swivel joint, this combination of extensions. And now it's stuck on something else. Oh, the vacuum harness. How does that come off? All these vacuum lines are metal, so we can't bend them. So that whole harness is gonna come off with this. Had to unbolt this bracket. It was probably gonna slow us down quite a bit. So I have to lift it up over the studs that appear to be in the intake manifold without breaking any of those metal vacuum lines. And then, once I got it unhooked, it should slide off of there. There we go. Look at that. That is the most technically over-designed throttle I've ever seen. Oh, there's still gas in it. Yeah. Hey, there's just liquid fuel sitting in the manifold.
Yeah.
That's something. Oh, the gasket broke. Shit. Well, it's totaled. Nope, it's done. God, that's gonna be hard to find. We might just have to RTV that.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is rubber.
Wow.
So that's good to know. So I can't really get the vacuum harness out of here because it's all metal. So my next plan of attack is the power steering pump. But I don't know where the tensioner is. I'm trying to like look around on the, because this engine's got V-belts. This belt only goes to the crank pulley, the water pump, and the power steering. And I know the crank pulley and the water pump ain't gonna be moving. So somehow the power steering pump does. And I can't find any slide brackets like the alternator has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Am I breaking anything down there? No. That's such a convoluted way to do the belt on here. It sounds like something's breaking. Oh my god. Jeez, man.
There's some like tubes right under here.
Yeah, those metal ones.
Scraping on a
Oh, I see.
bolt there.
There we go.
Nice. Okay.
There we go. Okay, to pivot the power steering pump, you just gotta crack these 2 bolts free and then loosen this one. And then it'll pivot like that, which is really weird. But anyway, we started removing the manifold bolts. This one was easy. This one was relatively easy. For the bottom 2 on the corners, I just used a swivel extension like this. Not because it swiveled, but because it was just the right length to fit the ratchet in here. So now the manifold is ready to come off, aside from the EGR tube. That's what I'm having trouble with. I can't break that free, and there's not enough room to get back there to undo it from the exhaust side. There's a whole bunch of washers on there. Alright, so with the EGR tube and vacuum harness and coolant lines all still connected to the manifold, as you may imagine, it's pretty difficult to get off. So we're interfering with the power steering pump bracket and the EGR tube and a bunch of bullshit. But while I was prying the manifolds off of the engine, Clay was able to reach in there and get this, which is just the intake gasket. As I figured, there's no exhaust gasket. I've never even seen something like this. This is what it's supposed to look like, right? Yeah. Maybe there was a separate gasket for the exhaust, but it's not in there now, so yeah. That's got to be why it was so loud. Well, and the manifold's cracked in that one spot. But all the other holes in this is all just heat shield. There's just this one big ass crack right here. So hopefully, if we can patch that up and get this new gasket in here, it'll quiet this thing up. I really don't like recording things at night, but to fill y'all in, we got the new gasket in there, and the manifolds are all torqued down, but it was a hell of a process to get to that point. There's a whole bunch of particles in my intake manifold. So, with the manifolds disconnected from the engine, they were sitting down and backwards from where they needed to be. And we had a hell of a time lifting them up and forwards to get them to line up with all the bolt holes. And what ended up being our catalyst problem was this bracket. Somehow, the manifolds needed to go farther forward than this bracket would allow them to. We renamed this to the annoying bracket just because it was stupid annoying. We probably spent like 2 or 3 hours getting these manifolds back on. Everybody else went home by now. So this bracket bolts to the engine block between the block and the motor mount. I don't know if you'll be able to see it from up here, but I had to put a jack on the oil pan to hold the engine up. I then loosened the engine mount, which loosened the annoying bracket, and then we were able to put the manifolds on where they needed to go. I tightened the engine mount back up, which tightened the annoying bracket back up, and somehow magically now its bolt holes don't line up anywhere near where they're supposed to be. So I'm probably just not going to worry about those bolts because like I said, this thing is held by the engine mount, and those bolts go tight. So as long as the power steering pump can hold belt tension, which I'm going to need to tighten that a little more, probably. I don't know. I'm going to figure that out later. But that's kind of a summary of what we did. Well, my next objective is to find a gasket for this, because that broke. So if I can't find a gasket for that, I'll just have to use RTV. And then do something about this pipe that I don't know if that even does anything or connects to anything. I really don't understand how that works at all. But I'll have to find some sort of a tube because it broke off over here. So this metal hose thing that goes from the exhaust manifold back into the air box, I thought it had something to do with the EGR system, but it's just a preheater, they call it. So when the engine's cold, there's this little flap in here that opens to let the air, instead of cold air being taken from over here, it takes air from the exhaust manifold area. Not inside the exhaust manifold, but just kind of like from right there. So that weird fitting on the manifold doesn't actually go inside of it. It's just to direct this hose so that when the engine's cold, it can suck in hot manifold air, which helps it warm up faster. That's all this does. We broke this hose taking it off, and I thought it was like pretty important. So I went out and bought some of this stuff, which didn't end up working. It's too thick. Like you can't bend it around these tight corners like this. So I'm just gonna go return this. But it's a 2-inch diameter pipe, and I was able to just stretch out the existing hose to make up for the piece that we broke off of it. So you don't need this, and you can just disconnect it, and nothing bad will happen aside from your engine won't warm up as fast. But I kind of want to keep it because now I'm in Wisconsin, and obviously it gets really cold here. So this, it's probably going to be helpful, assuming this vacuum shit all still works. So I got the EGR valve back on, and that's pretty much as far as I can get without this gasket, because the throttle thing is next. I don't even know if you would call this a throttle body. This really is kind of a marvelous piece of engineering from the 80s. I'm going to have to clean off the bottom side of that. But the butterfly valve in here is so small. Like, how is that engine supposed to breathe? You can see the fuel injector down there. And it's very clean in there too, because you gotta think there's constantly fuel being sprayed at this throttle. So it keeps everything clean, prevents the carbon from building up. And then you got your weird idle motor there, and this weird button, and your throttle position sensor, and this is, I believe, the idle air control valve, maybe? It's a pretty intricate thing. But I can't put it on without a gasket, so I'm kind of on pause for the time being. Finally got my throttle gasket.
What?
Oh yeah.
What's going on?
I'm making a video.
Oh.
You want to be on YouTube?
Yeah.
Got the throttle bolted on with my new gasket in there. Just the 4 bolts around the edge. It's really just, you know, reverse of removal at this point. Got this bracket back on here. Now I got to plug in all the wires and get those routed around. Alright, I believe I have everything plugged in. There's that, I think this sensor down here is the coolant sensor, because I forgot the coolant lines go through the intake. And then this one is the intake air temperature sensor. And I got this weird button thing plugged in. I don't have these vacuum lines plugged in. I don't have like a good air filter for it, so let's see. I don't really want to start it with that air filter. We'll just hook up the battery and see if it runs. So we're looking for like white smoke. Let me know if it starts on fire. Let me know if fuel starts spraying everywhere.
Okay. Oh my god. It's spinning, definitely.
Well, we definitely still got exhaust proof. At least it started first try though.
Can I touch that?
Touch what?
That spinny thing.
If you want to get your finger ripped off, you can touch it.
Oh man.
Where is it? I don't know. That manifold's probably cracked in like 8 different places. Fuel is dripping in there. Woo! Honestly, I think it runs a little better. It's idling higher. It's still sputtering, but it's not like completely just crawling to stay alive. When it's warm though, it's a lot more stable too. What are you doing?
I don't know.
Don't you remember how to drive a stick?
Well, I have to put it in first.
Oh.
Brake, Jesus. So, what did you do?
Let go of the clutch.
While it was in first gear?
I was in first.
Yep.
Why is it in first gear?
Because I was parked.
Oh.
I can't leave it in neutral when we're parked, otherwise it'll roll away. Yeah. There you go. There you go. You did it. Without a tachometer.
It's the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced.
You're doing it. You're doing it. All right, you're doing it. You know what? You're doing it, Clay. Like, if you had to move this truck or die, you would live.
Alright, how do you do this?
You just take it out like a normal 80s person.
I'm in the 80s.
What are you thinking?
I don't know.
Wait, what is, you found something just a second ago.
There's the hazard.
Yeah, that's the hazards.
This thing, I assume it adjusts the wheel, right?
No, there's no adjuster. It's that old.
So this doesn't move it up and down?
No, no, it's just there, whether you like it or not.
I don't know.
You're onto something. Hey!
That is the most complicated thing I think I've ever seen in a car.
All right, well, it only took you like 3 minutes. That's good. I just changed the oil because it hasn't been changed in probably years. Kyle never changed it when he had it, so no telling when it was last changed. We'll see if I smoothed out the engine anymore. Why is it screaming? It's just the hood spring that's doing it. This thing is everybody's favorite part of the truck. Well, I don't know, it sounds a little happier.
Now that we're in focus.
Are you ready?
All right. For the 0 to 60, baby. Oh my gosh.
Come on!
We're almost there.
All right, 60.
Nice.
So the project was a success. Using some exhaust repair paste and installing a manifold gasket did two things. It eliminated any exhaust gas from getting into the cab, which was my main goal. Like, it still leaks from the downpipe, but now you can actually drive it with the windows up without suffocating. It also made the engine run way better. Like, before it would idle so low, it didn't even register on the tachometer. Now it idles at like 500 RPM when cold, which is still low, but at least it's not dying at every turnover. I got the throttle gasket from AutoZone. It was a special order, and it took 5 days to have it shipped to the store, but I was very surprised they still make these. Clay drove the truck. I'm trying to encourage him to brush up on his manual driving skills, and we did an oil change, which I'm sure the engine was very happy about. But just when everything was going well, a brand new light showed up on the dashboard. When it got dark, I noticed the temperature light was dimly lit, which I assume means it's running just a little hot. I proceeded to drive it for another 45 minutes to see what happened, and I noticed slight fluctuations in the light's brightness. Under hard acceleration, the light would be a little brighter than it was under normal cruising, and that makes sense. I figure all this temperature sensor really is a resistor. Power is sent to the light or gauge, then to this sensor, which grounds to the engine block. The hotter that sensor is, the lower its resistance becomes, which allows more current through, which moves the needle up or makes the bulb brighter. So the engine is probably running at just over operating temperature, likely just because of an old and unmaintained cooling system. So I've been sitting here letting it idle for a minute, choking myself out with exhaust leak gas, and the light is just barely on, but it doesn't seem to be getting any brighter. So I think it's fine. And of course, most importantly, me and Jacob discovered the radio, of all things, still works. Impeccable.